back to Shake Hands Podcast, part 2 of our interview with Mr. Steve Ferrell, head coach at Waterloo West, the man, the myth, the legend behind the Iron Sharpens Iron Camps, Iron Elite. So we'll just get right back into it. I want to welcome everybody back. Thanks for tuning back into our second half of this podcast. I decided to split it into 2 parts because this man is so involved in wrestling that I wanted to make sure we got all the kinds of different stuff in there for you guys that are interested in just what goes behind those camps, what goes behind the man that coaches at West High. So we were on to Cole Knight was our next guy that we were getting ready to talk about here coming up at West. For those of you who didn't tune in the first one, we're just going through some of the lineup that Steve has this year coming up at the Waterloo West High. It's a 3A program here in Iowa. It's the former home of Dan Gable where he graduated from and wrestled for. Waterloo also has the home of the Dan Gable Museum if you're ever in town, if you're coming to town for one of those Iron Elite tournaments here in town. Don't be afraid to stop down to the Dan Gable Museum and check it out. They have a wrestling room in there for you warming up and stuff, and it's only about 2-3 blocks away from where you're going to be holding the Iron Elite, what's it called? The Iron Elite
Fall Nationals
and
Youth National Duels.
And Youth National Duels. So there you go. So I want to welcome you guys back there on YouTube. This is my first YouTube one. For those of you listening on the podcast, I'm going to start doing it on YouTube. So if you want to check out the video, it's just going to be 2 guys sitting there talking, maybe 3 or 4 someday, hopefully. And gradually it'll get bigger and better. But I'm just starting out, so hopefully you stick with us and you keep being entertained and getting to meet some of our wrestlers, coaches, referees, officials, and people who just have a tie to wrestling. You don't even have to be a wrestler. Maybe you have a kid that wrestled. That'll be enough for me to want to interview you and just get your take on wrestling. So here we go. What about Cole? What do you know about this kid? Is he a senior, I believe, this year? His father, Jesse Knight, great guy. I know him personally. Works at John Deere's. And known Cole since he was scrapping in the youth circuit.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be an unsung hero for us this year at 132. He had success at our ISI camps. He was also a member of one of the Team Iowa teams at Iowa AAU. He did a lot of freestyle and Greco. He's a kid that's always one of the first kids in the room, one of the last kids to leave, always doing extra stuff. So I think it's going to pay off for him this year.
Anybody else? I believe, is Eddie one of your next guys? I had Eddie. I seen him this summer at camp.
Yeah, Eddie might be in there with, we have Sykes that wrestled at 120 last year. I think he'll go up to about 138 for us. He had some success at camps as well. He had a good off season. I think Hicks or Eddie will be in the 145, 152 range. 160, 170 for us is kind of open. We have Chapman. He got third at districts at 170. He'll probably be up at 182. Adam Tier is a kid for us that wrestled either 195 or 220 for us last year. He had 19 wins for us on varsity. So he'll be returning there for our upper weights, anywhere from 195 to 220, and then heavyweights kind of up in the air with Jared. Jared.
Jared Francis.
And then we have Burris. He's saying he wants to come back out. He was part of that rugby team that was state champions.
That's a kid who I've known since he was a little guy. He used to wrestle in my front yard with my son when they were 8, 9 years old. He used to roll around. That kid's he's had a pretty interesting life and some struggles, and I just really want to see that kid do well and come out on top someday. I know he struggles with his emotions as well and his environment, and I tell him all the time, surround yourself with people that you want to be like, and not people that just want you around them to drag you down. And if he does that, I think he'll have a lot more success, not just in wrestling, but in general. Burrs, I've taken that kid bowling and other places with me when he was younger. He's a good kid. At heart, I think sometimes he has influences around him that drag him the wrong way. So we've talked about your team, and we talked about, you said you got a couple spots where it might be open. There's a lot of talk these years about 13 weight classes, 11 weight classes, 10 weight classes like they're in college. What's your feeling on that? Do you think they should change the number of weight classes, change the weights of the weight classes or anything like that? How do you feel about the weight classes and what they're talking about with possibly cutting a weight class or 2 or 3 out of the lineup that I've been hearing rumblings about?
I believe Pennsylvania is going to go with, is it 12 or 11 or something like that
Yeah,
for this season?
I think one in New York or somebody might be going down as well, just for duels. And then another one that had a 90-some pound weight class. They added for the smaller people for I forget what it was for. It might have been New York that was doing it there as well. So you like the idea of cutting the weight class?
I really don't. I mean, even when I was at small schools like Northeast Goose Lake and Lone Tree, you know, I saw it as an opportunity to recruit kids. You know, I'd be going around and, I kind of felt like I was a guy from a fair or something. I'm like, I think you look like you're about 160 pounder. I'm gonna, I could, anytime you're around wrestling, you can kind of tell, what kids weigh and things like that. And, I've always had pretty good success on, recruiting kids, at the school, just, getting them out and, using that tool that, the UFC has a lot of wrestlers, you look like a tough guy, things like that. And, just try it, I mean, even if it's an open room coming in and just, seeing if it's for them. I think that, we're a big enough school, definitely, that, to be able to recruit those guys out.
You're recruiting. You talk about that recruiting issue, and now you're working across town at the East High while you coach over here at West High. Is that been a challenge for you?
For me, it hasn't. I mean, I have Joe Cadillac. He's an English teacher here. So that definitely helps us to have at least somebody in the building, so for me, it hasn't been that much of a challenge. Also, my prep is the last hour of the day, so if I do need to leave, I'll, talk to my admin about it and things like that. But, I would like to get here, but it is, this is all I can control right now, and
it's less than 3 miles away from middle school, so the drive, you just don't get to see him every day. What would you say is your favorite wrestling memory, either for yourself or maybe as a coach, or overseeing it, or just as a fan? What's a wrestling match or something that happened that really sticks out in your mind that you can remember?
Probably for me was my freshman year at Cedar Falls. When I think of good memories, we were state champions there in '98. My brother got second on that team. I was varsity on that team. Being able to, one, make the team, to be on the state championship team was a very good memory for me, because a lot of those kids that were on the team, we went to kids tournaments together growing up and, had that camaraderie there. And it was a thing that you just, when you went out to wrestle, you weren't just wrestling for yourself, you were wrestling for the team as well. And, I'll remember that for the rest of my life. As a coach, Forrest, I know Forrest Marks, he works at ISI for us in Iron Elite, and coaching him when he started wrestling in 7th or 8th grade, and I had him as a freshman where he was like 5-15, and then 15-15 as a sophomore, and then junior year he was 25-11, and then senior year he was a runaway from placing at state, and he was 38-8. Being able to see that growth, being able to be a part of that was really cool. That and I think that's another thing, that wrestling for some people isn't instant gratification. It's not a video game where if you're losing you can just shut it off and turn it back on again, where you have to be persistent, and definitely saw that in Force and some other kids that I've coached. For example, Aaron Slaughter over there at Lone Tree was another kid that I got there that the first 2 years losing records. Then the first year I was there, he won 30 matches, and then he was another kid that was a round away from placing. That was a 39-7 or something like that, and it's just cool to see that growth in kids. And my biggest memory was probably when as a fan was going to, it was Dan Gable's last year, it was at the Unidome, was the NCAA's, I think it was like 96. I remember going there with my family and watching that when they set the points. They had the most team points at NCAA Division One. Iowa won their national title. I think Oklahoma State was coming in as a favorite. So as a fan, I would have to say probably that year was, I think Ironside won it his senior year, and McAravey, and there's a bunch of other big wins there that Iowa had. But that was just a great national tournament. Plus, it was jam-packed. I know they like having it in New York, and they like having it at big venues and things like that. But when you have it there, and here in God's country, it's always fun to see that because it's jam-packed.
Yeah, wall to wall. That's why that jam-packed kind of feeling. That's why I believe Schwab up at UNI, since we're right down the street from them, mentioned Schwab and those guys. They get a lot of Iowa talent, and they pack that West gym, and it's miserable to sit on them hard bleachers with no back support in that little gym. But is it exciting when those matches are going and they're scrambling and there's 1 point difference and the riding time is going and everybody around you can feel everybody's heart beating and the intensity in the room because it's so tight and it's so many people in such a small area. And they're all there for one reason, to support UNI, or maybe they like a guy that's wrestling for Iowa State or something like that that's on the opposing team. But that is quite a event. If you've never been to a wrestling event, which I'm sure if you're listening to this you have, but if you haven't and you're listening with somebody in the car and they're listening to this podcast, get to one. Get to one of those big events where it's packed in there and the crowd is going crazy and everybody sounds like a wrestling mom.
And you Facebook Lived it because I couldn't even get into the building.
Yeah.
And it was you and
You
I.
had tickets.
Yeah, I had tickets, but I couldn't get into the building because I had my son with me. So he's crazy. So I didn't know if he was going to be, jumping around or going nuts or, lost him for a bit or something. So we ended up saying no. But you Facebook Lived it, so you could still watch the duel, it was an excellent duel. But you said it was so hot in there. If you want to turn I think the analogy you said was like turn your oven on and open it up. And, that's how hot it is in there.
Pull a chair up and sit in front of it.
But it was jam packed. But it's a great environment for the sport of wrestling, and kudos to the staff there with Schwab and those guys to build that, because I've been in dual meets before at Northern Iowa, which nobody was there before that, 10 years ago.
I love what he's done up there. Schwab's doing a great thing up there with Roper's assistant, and they're doing some really, and Randy Pugh, those guys are doing some great things. They're bringing in a lot of local talent. Drew Foster winning this year. He was at one of your camps this summer as a counselor, and he's a national champ, never a state champ. Come in, Randy Pugh, I believe it was, believed in him, got him up there at UNI. And he just earned his way, and that was really special. I wish they would put some take all the seats out that they have in there and put some seats with some back support for people like me. I need a little back support. So we lose, maybe we lose 25 seats in that place because it takes up a little bit more room. But boy, I would sure like to be a little bit more comfortable when I'm sitting down up there. By the end of that night, I'm wore out because I'm yelling and screaming like everybody else. This year I'm going to try to do some more of those Facebooks Live and try to get as many of those as I can. And unless I get in trouble for it, I'm going to keep doing it and commentating during it and having a good time. So if you can't get to the UNI meet, find me on Facebook at Daniel Magana. I'm the only one with that last name on Facebook, Magayna, I believe. Dan Magana, find me there. And you can watch the UNI meets. I'll be trying to Facebook Live those when I'm at home and in town and able to do that. All right, so you talk about wrestling and that it does things for kids. What do you think wrestling does that's different from, say, other sports like football and basketball and baseball? It's the sports that get all the attention on TV.
I think the biggest thing for wrestling is that it's something that you definitely have to earn. It's all you out there. As we talked before, there are some team aspects to that, which we love. And cherish those. But I think Terry Brands does it great. You don't deserve anything. You got to earn it. And I think that those are the life lessons that, I'm taking on today when, something doesn't go the way I would like it to go at a camp or a tournament, that you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I need to take ownership of this. How can I make this better? How can I prevent this from happening again? And I think this is also a quote that I have up here, Cale Sanderson quote, to be able to evolve, you need to do that, or you're going to learn a quick and painful lesson from somebody who has. And I think I look at that as a business standpoint. I look at that as a coaching standpoint. That to be able to not do things as just a cookie cutter approach, like adding the one-on-one team sessions, to be able to add those things in there that is not that's so best for me, because sometimes what's best for me is the easiest things to do, to get out of your comfort zone and to be able to be like, hey, I'm putting myself out here. If we fail, we fail. But, my effort is to make this camp better for the kids, for the coaches, or the tournament better. And if I'm uncomfortable, so be it. And I think those are the things that I learned from the sport of wrestling, that when you get your hand raised, it feels like none other. I've been a part of, the football or track or, baseball, and when it just doesn't feel the same as getting that hand raised.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of comments on what you were saying there is, I've been with you for 4 or 5 years, I think, now maybe 4 years, maybe 5, I'm not sure, with these Iron Sharpen Iron Camp, and I've seen every year, I've seen you make adjustments, try to improve. You take comments and criticisms from parents and counselors and athletes, and you're constantly evolving that and doing little tweaks here and there and trying stuff and seeing what works and trying to improve your product so that you give so much more than just going to a camp, which, like I said, my son has gone to several different camps, and the first camp he ever gone to where he actually asked me at the end of camp was, do they have another one of these? When's their next one? Was Iron 79, we were at Loris, and I remember I let him go play in the dorms with his buddies in between sessions, and he just had the time of his life, and we had been to several camps. He'd been going to camps for years, and that's the first time, and I about broke my thumbs in my pocket trying to get my phone out to find out when that next camp was so I could get him to it. And so we've been bought in 100% ever since. So good job there. What's the next point you would say? I lost track of what I was saying there. Yeah, it happens. We all get a brain fart. So with wrestling, I had a couple more questions for you. You talked about, advice for young coaches out there. What would be some advice you would like to give any up-and-coming young coaches or whatever that might be coming into coaching? You've been coaching how many years now?
This will be my 14th.
14th year. That's quite a long time.
Yeah.
I have a 14-year-old son. Oh, my goodness. When you got a teenager, look out. So after 14 years, what's a couple of nuggets of coaching advice you would give to guys that might be just getting into the coaching field or thinking about getting into coaching?
My biggest thing is to, professional development, to be able to, get on there online, to be able to, don't be afraid to send emails out to, some of these big name guys or to other guys that you see that have had coaching success, to be able to pick their brain a bit. Even if you get one thing, you can add that to your arsenal. It's going to help a kid, and I think that's one of the things that for young coaches is to be able to, constantly have that learning mindset, to be able to know that there's different types of learners out there. You got your hands-on learners, you got your auditory learners, to be able to understand that, and also how to motivate kids. Some kids are the kids that, the day and age of yelling at kids, sometimes that works for some kids. Sometimes they'll completely shut down. What motivates these kids to compete at a high level? Also to be able to, see when you are, pushing a kid to be better or you're pushing a kid away from the sport. I think that the mindset of wrestling is something that we don't think about. And I think that is huge. I think the more you build positive relationships with kids, you're able to read them. And, each kid's different. don't be afraid to, read different books about coaching, things like that. And also, I think to, write down those lesson plans and go back and to see that, being able to peak kids at the right time, being able to see, okay, what are some things in my lesson plan that I can do differently, to, tweak here and there. And I think that's the biggest thing.
I agree. As a coach myself, I'm constantly learning. My kids, my son does it a lot, and a lot of my higher elite kids are, well, I've done this 100 times. I've done this. I know how to do that. Well, do you know how to do it both ways? Do you know how to do it against left-handed wrestlers? Do you know how to do it when you're tired? Can you do it? Can you make adjustments to it? What if that don't work? What's your next thing? I mean, finding ways to continue to improve and not just be stagnant. I never think that I know everything in coaching. I'm always learning. You bring coaches in to talk to at the coaches classes at Iron Sharpens Iron, and I take full advantage of that, and I listen and I try to be involved in that, because I think the moment you stop learning is the moment you don't know anything, because you obviously think you know everything at that point if you don't think that you need to learn something. It's always evolving, always learning. And I think, like you said, with coaching styles, I think you have a coaching style. Everybody has a coaching style, but then you've got to see that, hey, maybe this kid doesn't respond to that style as well. So how do I need to go off there? Because I'm a very loud and aggressive coach, but I also know that there's some kids who don't respond to that. So when I see that in a kid, I try not to be as heavy on him, and then I find ways to go outside of my box and go over and maybe just speak to him in a quiet voice, or just mention this something. But I also agree 110%, you got to keep it positive. I mean, I might get on my kids once in a while, but if anybody comes to my room and hears me yelling, if they don't listen to what I'm saying, they're going to think I'm a terrible coach. But if they listen to what I'm saying, they're hearing things like, that's a great job, that's what I'm talking about, that's the stuff I'm looking for, keep doing that, that was perfect. I'm saying positive stuff, but I'm saying it in such an aggressive and a loud voice, sometimes people just hear noise. But those kids, when they're with me long enough, they understand, hey, he's not yelling at me, he's yelling for me. He's coaching me up, he's telling me I'm great. I am great. Pretty soon they believe in themselves, and I believe that when you can get a kid to believe in themselves, they can do amazing things. And so I 100% agree with you on, you got to find out which kids need to be talked to, which kids need to be comforted, and which kids need to be chewed on, because some kids want to be pushed, they want to be challenged. My kid, a couple times, his biggest tournaments he's won, I said, what's different? He said, you didn't think I could do it. Well, he saw doubt in my eyes. So he wanted to prove me wrong. So sometimes I got to pretend I don't think he can do it when I really think he can do it. But sometimes I don't know if he can do it. But he likes that challenge. That's what he wants. And some kids need to be, need to know everything about the guy they're wrestling. They want to know it because they want to feel that they know they're more prepared, they're more able to beat that guy. Other kids don't want to know a thing about the guy they're wrestling. And each kid is different. Everybody has their philosophy on that. Since my son was little, I would tell him, hey, this kid, if he's good, I said, this kid is good. You're going to show me, hey, this is going to test you. Let's see how good you really are. And so he's gotten to a point to where he wants to make sure that guy is good enough to be on his significant wins list on track wrestling, because he don't want to wrestle somebody just to wrestle him. He wants to wrestle the best guys out there because he wants to prove himself every time, which is great. But I've got another kid in my club who, if I tell him a kid is a state qualifier, all of a sudden I got a deer in headlights. I got a kid with poo-poo in his pants. So I got to make sure that kid, all I got to tell him is, hey, this is what we need to do to beat the kid. I get to give him a couple pointers. Hey, let's circle left against this kid because he doesn't have a shot that direction. Or let's get hand control because when he's got his hands tied up, he can't shoot very well. So I find just a couple pointers to get that kid. Hey, we're not going to choose bottom against this kid. He loves being on top. We're going to go ahead and choose on top because he's weak on bottom. Or whatever it is. And that's enough for that kid to know he can go out there and be successful, because now he believes he knows something that kid doesn't know. So there's different ways of approaching each kid. What is a normal practice for you? Like, what's a typical practice for you here at West High and for the West High athletes?
I think for us, on Mondays and Tuesdays we come in the mornings, for our varsity guys, and we get a good sweat in. We're either running or lifting. Sometimes we're drilling. Kind of depends on our need at that time. Beginning of the year, getting into shape, things like that. Want to maintain strength. It may be, towards the end of the year, drilling.
So how many times a week do they lift before and after season?
We try to get 2 lifts in a week.
Okay.
So that's, big for our program as well. And I think also coming in the mornings, in my opinion, you have, Saturdays where you're competing in the morning. So we need to get these kids, able to compete in the morning. And, for some of them, it's getting out of their comfort zone. For some of them, they may not have a ride. There's excuses out there. So, I kind of call Cole Knight our West High Uber, which, he's going and he's picking up like 4 or 5 kids, So he's our West High Uber. We get him there. I would say also, what we established was an issue I saw right away, and the first couple of weeks when we started checking grades was, I had 7 or 8 kids that were ineligible. I mean, that were going to be ineligible, that had D's or F's. Anybody that have D's or F's, what we do is they have a study table right after school. So they go to that study table while everybody that has A, B's, or C's, they're practicing. So when they get done, then, my assistant coach, Cadillac, he will put them through a workout then after that. So we pretty much have, which is good because our room is smaller. Our room's not that big. It's a way that...
It's pretty surprising how small the rooms are here at East and West.
Yeah.
Considering the legacy they have of wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, it really does help us out. And then this year, when we're adding girls, girls will probably go that second half where, we'll have... in my opinion, I think it gets kind of packed once you get, 25 is kind of the max there. And then, we'll have, girls and our guys that have, D's or F's will be going, after that first practice goes. And one thing that I really was proud of was, and it wasn't just me, Joe Cadillac did a great job of watching those kids' grades and doing the study table, is we had 0 kids that were ineligible.
That's awesome.
That finished the season with us, which I was extremely proud of, grade-wise, that, we're using wrestling as that vehicle to be successful. They need that high school education, and in my opinion, that failure is not an option for grades, and we really talk about that student athlete, that student aspect of it, and I was proud to incorporate that, which we had to, I saw that there was an issue there, and so, we get into our practice point, where we have our warm-up. Then we get into technique, and then we have our drilling, we have our live conditioning, and then cool down. And that's kind of like our basic, format of practice. Yes, it's going to change here or there.
How long of practices do you hold it? Do you have activity buses that come at certain times?
We have activity buses that come about 6 o'clock or so. So with us, we sometimes split that up where we're in the wrestling room for an hour and a half, and then we go get maybe a plate workout in, or some sprints in, while that other group's in there doing their wrestling. So it kind of changes from here to there. It probably starts off the year at 2 hours, then probably goes down to maybe an hour and a half.
Now, another thing, we're getting towards the end of our podcast, but I wanted to make sure we brought up things about technology. Technology has changed wrestling in the sense of track wrestling, flow wrestling, the amount of podcast technique sessions that are out there that kids can get online, check out anytime. So, I mean, back in our day, I know I had to get a book from the library to look up moves, and I'd watch, I can't even remember some of the people's names. I just remember looking at pictures and trying to read through how to do certain moves. My coaches had to know everything. Nowadays, kids can get online, they can learn something in the room, they can go home and look it up and see 5 different high-level clinicians show the same move. So we've got things like that. How do you feel about the technology when it comes to also, there's videotaping nowadays. We got track wrestling at most events. It's not done on paper. We have media coverage that's getting much bigger and hopefully keeps helping grow. Things like that, fundraising, social media, those kinds of things, the software at the tournaments. How does technology, you think, help or hurt wrestling going forward?
When you talked about the book thing with the moves in the book, it's funny because I remember I watched a flow documentary there of Kerry Colott, and his dad's like, that move, you did not do it like the book, you got to do it over again. I think it's good because sometimes when you tell kids, like right now we have whatever they use for football, I can't think what it is.
Huddle.
Huddle, yes. We have Huddle. We have that access all for West High, for all sports. and we use that here, and so all of our kids can go back there and look at their matches and whatnot. So I like having huddle, and it goes right to the kids' email, so they can get on it, and it's.
You use huddle for wrestling.
So we use huddle for wrestling, and sometimes you can put different notes in there to your kids, because sometimes you're saying it to them, and they're not actually seeing it, and then once they see it, okay, this is why coach is saying this. So you have that teachable moment through technology, which I think it definitely helps the kids.
Yeah, and the thing, I bring that up because, like we were talking about earlier about kids, some kids need to know who they're wrestling. They want to know how good he is, or they want to know what he's good at, or they want to prepare themselves. Football's been videotaping opponents since I can remember there being huge camcorders out there, and looking at their opponents saying, hey, this is what they do, this is how we stop it, preparing for that game. And I think a lot of people, especially old school coaches, don't do that at all. They don't think that helps. But if you go to any college program, high level program, that doesn't mean you have to bombard the kids with information, especially if they're not ready for that. Some kids aren't at that level yet where they are able to break that down with you and really understand it. Where others, you can give a few pointers to what that guy is. That guy, if he's throwing in legs, well, guess what we're getting ready to work on this week for that guy? We're going to defend legs because we know that that's a guy you're going to see at districts. So I think that kind of information helps. Also, today's day and age, people are, I don't want my kid to know anything about the guy. Well, guess what? He's got a phone, and he can go on Track Wrestling. He will look that guy up. Whether you think he doesn't or not, they do. Very few of them don't. And if they don't, they really don't want to. And that's good. Don't tell them anything about the kid. They don't want to look him up. That's fine. Don't do it. But more often than not, I've watched those kids say they don't do that. I've watched parents, I don't care who they got wrestled. Just bring them on, whoever it is. I don't care. Bull, because I seen you over in the corner looking at his track profile. You know who he's beaten. You know who he's lost. You know where he wrestles. So when I see people say that, I'm like, baloney. You're gonna go look at it because you're curious. It's like ESPN. It's not gonna change the outcome of a game. 2 NFL teams, but you want to go see, hey, who's good, who's not good, what are they good at, what are we looking for, what are we watching for, what's going to happen in the game, oh man, this quarterback reception, all that stuff happens. So you look on Track Wrestling, they're going to find out. So go ahead. That's why I did that with my son early. I seen that coming. I watched some high school kids get on there and look up who they're wrestling, look up who they've beaten, what they placed at state. And if they're not prepared for that, if they're deer in the headlights when that happens, they're in trouble. So I'm totally for, hey, especially if you get them young. Now, if you get them in high school, it's hard to do that because they ain't got time to develop that. But if you get them young, I let them kids know, yeah, this kid's really good. Let's see what you can do with him. Let's see how you compete. This kid was a state qualifier. Let's see if we're ready to be a state qualifier or not. Put it in a way that doesn't scare them, but challenges them and pushes them to elevate their game. Like I said, not every kid's ready for that, but a lot of those kids are going to be able to look it up themselves. And if you don't prepare them to look up or to understand, hey, so what if a guy is good? So what he's a state champion or a state runner-up? That just gives you an opportunity. All the pressure's on him. Now you can cut loose, have fun, do what you want. Because anything you do is going to be better than nothing. Because you're not expected to win. He is. So if you find a way to score on him, stop him from scoring, keep the score close, or maybe even beat him, dude, you've done amazing things today. So that's what I like technology. I know people from Illinois a lot of times, they'll go online and say cuss words into the microphone by the audio, by the Track Wrestling. I've watched them do it. Then call Track Wrestling or email them and say, hey, there's somebody swearing on my kid's video. I don't want that up. They'll take the video down so that kid ain't got video online for anybody to watch. Dude, my son is Dan McGee, Max, Daniel McGee. Go online, watch what he does, figure him out, and beat him. Because then he's going to have to expand his game. He's going to have to get better. So I'm okay with that. I want people to watch the video, figure him out. Because if you figure him out, then he's got to change his game, which makes him a better and more complete wrestler. So I'm totally okay with people watching video on my son. I'm like, watch him. Because if you can beat him with it, then good for you. You've done something. Because, that a lot of that is, people have habits. And everybody's got little tells or little things they do. If you know what they're doing, you can figure out ways to beat them. So any last points? We've reached our time limit of what I was looking to do. But any last points or any other comments you'd like to make or promoting any of your companies or business or anything this year before we end the podcast?
No, I think, I got my point across about everything. But I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for all the things you do for the sport of wrestling.
Well, thanks a lot, Steve. I appreciate you doing it. I'm sure we'll do it down the road again in the future.
We'll shake hands.
Yeah, Shake Hands Podcast. You seen it here first. Take care. See you next time.
I think it went pretty good.